to Journey Through Sci-Fi. My name is James.
My name is Matt.
And today's episode is episode number 5 of our series on space. So we've been looking at all different sorts of space films in sci-fi leading up to this episode. And today we're looking at the theme of getting help from above. So getting some sort of message from some other planet somewhere else, and that sort of leads to space travel in the two films we're going to be discussing in today's episode. So the first film we're looking at is Explorers from 1985, directed by Joe Dante. And what's the second film we're looking at, Matt?
Contact from 1997, directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Yes. Had you seen either of these before, Matt?
No, neither of them. I'd heard a lot about Contact, though. It's been recommended to me a lot. And I've got a lot of friends who really love Explorers from their childhoods, but I'd not seen either.
Okay, excellent. I'd seen both of these films before, but it's been so long since I've seen Contact. It was really nice to sort of go back to it and revisit it. And being a bit older as well, I think I took more away from this viewing of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So shall we start with Explorers then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Switch on the computer. Ready? Here goes.
From the director of Gremlins, Explorers, coming this summer from Paramount Pictures. The adventure begins in your own backyard.
So Explorers from 1985, directed by Joe Dante. What were your impressions of this film going in as an adult, watching a film which is it's aimed at a younger audience, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought I was hoping that I would really enjoy it, and I know that it's quite hard to enjoy, these beloved childhood movies if you watch them as an adult for the first time. The first half of this film, I absolutely loved it. I was completely swept up in it. I thought it's really sweet. The three boys who are the main characters are all just really good performances. Really engaged with it. And then the second half of the film, it completely fell apart, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Okay.
How did you find it?
It does go a bit mad towards the end.
A bit mad, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that, won't we? So I'm guessing you're familiar with Joe Dante then, and the sort of films he's put out in the past.
Yeah, so what's Joe Dante? I know it's definitely Gremlins. That's the one that springs to mind for Joe Dante.
Yep.
What else did he do?
So he also did Inner Space.
Oh, wow.
He did Small Soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And do you remember the old TV show Erie, Indiana?
Oh, yeah, I remember it well, yeah.
So he did quite a few episodes for that as well.
Yeah, I remember. No, I know that. He was he like a producer or something?
Yeah, I think so. He either wrote it or produced it, but I know I've seen his name sort of in credits for Erie, Indiana.
I loved Erie, Indiana.
It was great.
I've definitely only seen it once, but I remember watching it on, I think it was on Channel 4, and I was obsessed with it. I loved it. In fact, I wholly plagiarized one of the episodes for a creative writing exam. I think a SATs exam or whatever exam we would have been doing at about the age that was on British television. There's an episode of Erie, Indiana where he doesn't want to set his watch back, or he does want to set his watch back and the rest of the town doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And he gets trapped in a netherworld where he's, lost in time kind of thing, and no one else is in the town. And then he meets his older self, I think.
Fantastic.
And I remember that one vividly because I remember completely ripping off the entire episode for a creative writing story that I then got a really good grade on.
Amazing. Well, it was obviously a good enough sort of story to emulate.
Yeah. Do you remember the spin-off of Erie, Indiana?
No, there was a spin-off.
Yeah, it was, I can't remember what it's called. It was set in an alternate dimension. So it's still set in Erie, Indiana, but the Erie, Indiana of another parallel world.
Oh my God.
And there was two boys who looked like the two boys, roughly the same age, height, sort of hair, whatever. And they had really similar names, but they weren't Marshall and I can't remember the other guy from Erie, Indiana. And they were they could talk to the main characters, but obviously the characters from the original show, they only showed up like once or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just a bad... They basically just tried to remake it a few years later in this way.
So it's a whole separate series, not just a one-off parallel special.
No. Yeah, it was another TV show.
Yeah.
Because Erie, Indiana became a cult hit, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know how much later it was. I don't think it was that much later. It was around the same time because I remember I would watch Erie, Indiana on TV, and then it like transitioned into that when they ran out of episodes. And I remember just being like, what is this? This is rubbish. Get back to the other one.
Speaking of Erie, Indiana as well, Becky Dark, she guests on Evolution of Horror quite a lot with Mike's podcast. She is, I don't know if it's out by the time this episode's come out, but she's been doing a new podcast series called Return to Erie, Indiana. That's definitely something which I'd want to listen to.
I've seen that popping up on my Twitter feed, and I'm excited to give that a listen. I quite want to watch every episode and listen to the podcast and do it because I've never seen it again. I'd be fascinated to see if that show holds up.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so what else has Joe Dante done? He's done Small Soldiers, which was great. He also did, so I was watching, like over Christmas, I was watching the old bank holiday films that they pop on. And Looney Tunes Back in Action was on.
Oh yeah, that's one of his. That's a good film.
I didn't realise he directed it, but it makes so much sense having watched this because there's a bit in the Looney Tunes film where they go to like Area 51 and then they've got all of these old sci-fi monsters from different 50s sci-fi films.
Oh yeah.
So they've got like the Triffids from Day of the Triffids. They've got the alien from the island of This Island Earth. They've got Daleks. They've got all of these old homages to different sci-fi films. And that's something that Explorers is full of.
Yeah. So he's directed some pretty classic sci-fi films. Niche classic, but classics is fair to say.
Yeah, definitely.
But he's way before any of that, he is a proper sci-fi head, right?
Yeah.
He's
so
obsessed with all
you
these
can
films.
tell he's got like a real love for science fiction.
Yeah, and that passion is very on the screen in Explorers as much as any other film, isn't it?
Yeah. So that passion, we talk about sort of like he's quite sci-fi literate. What kind of reference points did you spot when you watched the film?
Well, it's completely packed with just little clips because what's the main kid's name? Is it Ben? I think it's Ben.
Ben.
He
played by Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, didn't recognise him at all until the end of the film. He just stays up all night, or he just leaves like a TV on in his room and it's constantly just playing sci-fi films. He knows all about like, he's got lots of ideas about what it might be like to talk to aliens because he's watched all of these movies and he's just obsessed with it. War of the Worlds is on right at the start. I know at the very end we see The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah.
And it's actually used in
it's
like
a
this
really poignant moment.
Pivotal plot moment. This Island Earth is in there, which I think I've seen. I've either seen it or I've seen Mystery Science Theatre do it or something like that.
Yeah, it's a big sci-fi sort of blockbuster, isn't it?
I think I've seen that one.
And then
what else is in there?
There's a poster of it came from outer space.
Is there?
Yeah, and the monkey, you know the monkey, as if you know exactly what that means in that film. There's one bit when they're in Wolfgang, who's one of the kids' basement sort of laboratory, and there's a little monkey figure with like the ones with the symbols. Yeah. So that's just like in Close Encounters.
Is it?
Yeah, because there's a toy like that in Close Encounters as well.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a direct thing. Knowing Joe Dante, it's probably. Yeah. But then there's all the sci-fi books as well.
Wolfgang says, they're here. Is that from Poltergeist?
Yeah, it's a Poltergeist reference. And they've also got, they reference Forbidden Planet as well, don't they? Because they say there's a similar machine to something else.
Yeah, and I think he's talking about the flying saucer and he's obsessed with the idea of the way the flying saucer works. He's trying to get his mate. I think that's This Island Earth. He's trying to get his mate to come over and watch it.
Yeah.
Listing it all off like that makes it sound terrible because it sounds like one of these films that's just like packed and it's just a reference movie, but it's not.
Yeah, that's all sort of like just beneath what's going on, really.
It's kind of like a primer for the way the kids are going to behave and why they go on the journey they do.
Exactly. It's just sort of like the main protagonist, it's important to know that he's obsessed with old sci-fi films. And that sort of like leads us into his own sort of sci-fi adventure. So what's the main sort of like premise of the film? What sort of happens?
Well, he's having these... So Ben's having these dreams and it looks a lot like Tron.
Yeah, it's definitely got Tron vibes, hasn't it?
The special effects are by the George Lucas's company.
Light and Sound or something. What's it called? Industrial Light and Magic.
Yeah. they do all the special effects. I can't remember if they did Tron or not. But it looks exactly like Tron. It's like he's sort of flying over a neighborhood that also looks like a circuit board. It's very trippy. Does it start with that? Is that the opening of the movie?
Yeah, so he has a dream and he's like flying through the sky and it looks like just your ordinary kid's dream where he's dreaming of flying. And then suddenly it takes a turn and he's looking at this weird sort of virtual reality schematic of something.
Yeah. And he rings his friend Wolfgang, River Phoenix.
Yep.
Also, didn't recognise him. I didn't recognise
on his walkie-talkie as well.
No
mobile phones.
Yeah. And he wants Wolfgang, he's going to draw what he saw in his dreams and he wants Wolfgang to take a look at it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes into like Back to the Future, Dexter's Laboratory kind of thing, right?
Yeah, definitely, because you quickly, the trio that we're going to be following are quickly assembled, aren't they, at the beginning of the film?
Yeah.
So we've got the character of Ben, who's played by Ethan Hawke. So he's the protagonist. He's this guy who loves like 50 sci-fi films, who's had this weird dream. And then you've got Wolfgang, played by River Phoenix. And he's sort of like this crazy inventor, isn't he?
Yeah, he's like he is like Doc Brown, right? But a little boy version.
Yeah, exactly. And his family are brilliant as well.
Yeah, I quite like those scenes.
Because they've got, there's just kids running around all over the place. And then I recognise both of the actors that played his mum and his dad.
His dad was James Cromwell, which is from iRobot and
Yes, of course.
Star Trek First Contact and Babe. He's the farmer in Babe. I don't know. Who was the mother?
So it's Dana Ivey.
Does mean
I think she's in Adam's Family.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think she's the woman who ends up with Cousin It.
What, in the second one? No, that's...
It happens in the first one.
Oh, really? Oh, Cousin It. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking of Uncle Fester.
He's a mistake. One's bald, one's got lots of hair.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think she is. That rings a bell.
Yes, that's the main place I recognise her from. So you've got their family and they're all sort of inventors and there's this crazy sort of house where everything's going wrong and everybody's looking for something and all the kids are running riot. So that's their sort of family life.
Yeah, and there's an interesting family parental dynamic with Wolfgang in that they're a bit hippie science.
Yeah.
And they're very supportive of Wolfgang being a boy genius and doing these experiments, but they're also a little bit distant, right? Like it's made clear that they're not that attentive to Wolfgang. He's faking being ill. And either the parents know that and don't mind him skipping school or don't realise that he's just faking and they sort of don't realise everything they're doing in the basement, and that is what enables Wolfgang to do everything they do.
Yeah.
They're not the most hands-on parents.
It's a bit like, because they've got so many different kids, they kind of find it hard to focus on each of them. It kind of seems a bit like they're a little bit neglectful, maybe?
I don't know if neglectful is the right word, but just overwhelmed, maybe. I don't know. And not
overwhelmed, probably, because it doesn't seem like he's being neglected.
Yeah.
It's more sort of like the kids can kind of do what they want within
They're kind
reason.
of running riot and Wolfgang's not getting a lot of parental attention. And then that's kind of doubled up and made very explicit with, is it Darren, his name?
Yeah, Darren, who's played by Jason Presson. I don't think he's done much other than this. Yeah, but I obviously didn't recognise him.
No, I don't recognise him. He's very good in this, though.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like a broken home type kid. He's a bit more rough than the other two. He just like randomly makes friends with them at the start of the film because he defends Ben from some bullies.
Yeah.
He's not, and again, it's not like explicit neglect, but he's obviously, his home's not a very happy one. He very casually mentions his dad drinks a lot.
And he's lost his job.
You can hear arguing from inside that makes him not even want to go in, and that's how they go off on an adventure. And
yeah, he's a bit more he's a bit more hardened than the other characters, and he's a bit of a sort of like, he does lots of little wisecracks, and he's a bit more of a skeptic about what's going on.
Yeah,
sort of. So you've got this cast, and everyone's very different. They're very clearly sort of like different characters. And then you've got Ben, who's the protagonist, who you don't really see much about his family life, do you?
No, I was expecting more trouble at home for Ben based on the way some of the themes are in this film. And also I think like in other Joe Dante films, that's a big thing in Erie, Indiana. Like the two boys in that are kind of going and doing their adventures because certainly the one who lives next door to Marshall is like, he's got a very unhappy life. It's a bit like, I think Joe Dante's got a similar sort of interest to Spielberg with the whole kind of broken home children going on adventures to make up for missing out on other things maybe. So I was expecting a little bit more in Ben's family about that. And he seems to have a very happy family life, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. They sort of like, they skim over that. I don't know if they really have, I don't know if we see the parents throughout the film.
We see his mum because she comes in.
Oh, yeah, and turns the TV off or something.
Yeah. And I think that might be the only time we see her.
Yeah.
I don't know if we see his dad. But there's nothing to imply that he's unhappy. Which doesn't really gel with kind of the kind of arc that the three of them go on and then what happens at the end of the film in space. You know, it doesn't quite mirror perfectly that Ben has this... Ben being the one to receive the message has this fairly happy family life.
Yeah. It's weird that, isn't it? Because the other characters seem a bit more rounded in that respect because you've got a bit more of a backstory to them. Whereas Ben's just sort of like, he's supposed to be the lead character, but you don't feel that connection towards him necessarily.
Yeah.
The main thing that sort of drives his character is his love interest.
Yeah.
Who's the hot blonde he keeps referring to.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind, what, he's supposed to be 15?
Are they? I was very confused about how old they're supposed to be.
They are like proper horny teenagers, aren't they?
Yeah. And also there's a scene about halfway through where they all drink beer.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not that weird for like underage kids to steal some beer off the parents and drink it. But I actually found it, I don't know, I must be getting old, but I found it visually shocking. I was like, how old are these kids supposed to be? I thought they were like 8.
Because they felt younger than they were acting at points.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a bit of a disconnect for me. I don't know how old they were when they were in this film.
I don't know how old they're supposed to be. I think they are like young teenagers. Like Darren's he's like Nelson Muntz, isn't he? Like,
yeah.
He is kind of teenager-y, although Nelson's supposed to be 10. Doesn't matter. Wolfgang's the one that seems really young because in the film he's constantly dressed up in like scientist clothes. Like he wears a lab coat and he's got big glasses, so he looks like a little boy dressed up as a man. So he kind of looks the youngest because of that weird disconnect. I guess the other two do sort of look and behave like teenagers.
Yeah. So speaking of Wolfgang, let's talk a little bit about sort of his experiments leading up to making what turns out to be a spaceship. When you're first introduced to him in the lab, what did you think about the mouse?
He's keeping a mouse in a cage. Oh yeah, he's got a mouse in a cage that's he's kind of trained it to touch some pads and it requests cheese.
Yeah, it's like different words, isn't it? It just keeps going, I want cheese or something like that continuously.
Yeah. It was cool.
It's like those little eccentric points kind of like really bring out his character.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the first thing you see.
That's why it made me think of like Dexter's Lab.
Yeah.
Like he's down there doing wacky science and it kind of sets him up as you know that he's got all the scientific know-how to do whatever magical stuff needs to happen in this film, and you don't really question it because he's taught a mouse to talk.
So what happens then? He puts his Apple computer on.
Is it an Apple?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure the Apple sign flashed up at one point. It's really sort of like looks outdated now, but obviously in the 80s, proper technology. And then they start making this weird, like, is it like a microchip, something like that?
No idea.
Some sort of weird.
Very unclear.
Whatever they they managed to create this weird computer thing.
Ben's drawn a schematic that he's seen in his dream, given it to Wolfgang. A few minutes later in the film, Wolfgang has built a spaceship. That's about all you need to know, I think.
Yeah,
right?
That's the ins and outs of
but
it.
The spaceship is controlled by the computer.
Yeah, because what it is like it's a giant bobble, isn't it? It's
it starts very small. It starts about the size of a golf ball, right? Blue ball.
And then they work out they can make it bigger and they can make it appear wherever they want to, and then they can travel around with it. And then there's a moment where Wolfgang, so Ben's playing around on the computer because the first thing they do is mess up the lab. The experiment goes wrong, make a load of mess, and then they decide they've got to go on a hill out in the sort of open to do it. And then Wolfgang gets put in the bubble, and then they work out that they can travel around inside the bubble, and that's sort of the core of this spacecraft that they're going to make.
Yeah.
So they take it one step further, and they go to a junkyard to get parts, don't they?
Yeah.
So,
They take a carnival ride pod.
Yeah.
I love that. That scene was probably the best scene in the film, and that was when I was really like all in, and I just thought it was so charming and nice. And if I could see why, like if I saw this when I was a kid, it'd be one of my favorite films. Was what I was thinking at that point.
Yeah. Because it's cool, isn't it? Because they basically create it out of a old like waltzer or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's all made out of makeshift stuff. So it's got that as the sort of main foundation of this, what turns out to be a spacecraft they're creating. And then they've got bits like they put a suitcase on the top.
Yeah, suitcase lid. They create 3 screens for each of them to look out the front.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them are washing machine doors.
Yep.
And one of them's a TV screen. So they've all got like a little portholes.
Yeah, and it's just so like imaginative.
Yeah.
And then they work out that they need some sort of oxygen because this is like an airtight bubble they create. So they've got little oxygen tanks as well.
Yeah, not really explained where they got that from.
I mean, sure.
Yeah.
But it did sort of like all of those elements made me think about like when I was a kid, and you'd make stuff out of like a coat hanger or like a clothes dryer, and you make tents, and then you make the tents pretend to be spaceships or things like that. And I thought all of those elements were really coming together in this.
Yeah, that's one of the best bits of the first half of the film, is that it just follows the logic of like a child's imaginative playtime. Like things work because they work. I dreamt a thing. Can you put it in your computer? Oh, it's made a spaceship. And then they build this big ship, which is, you know, a little beyond the realms of possibility in terms of like the engineering of it, but the imagination it's what you would, like you said, like you could build it out of a tent and stick some cardboard on the side, and it would, you know, you could build something similar, and you can imagine kids wanting to do that. And especially if you watched this when you were, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, you would think, oh, I could make a spaceship.
Yeah, exactly.
A washing machine door.
And that's it. And it's like, it's kind of that whole thing about space as well. Children used to want to be astronauts. And as a child, you find out what an astronaut is, and it's really cool. It's someone who goes up into the sky, goes on a different planet, and there's like no gravity. And this is all sort of commonplace for children growing up now. So all of that stuff that they did in the 50s with those previous films, with sort of telling us about what it would be like to go to space when there's no gravity and all of the cool stuff, and there's space suits and this and that, that's all coming through later to sort of like the 80s, where that's like an established trope. So you know all this stuff. So kids are dreaming about making their own spaceships, and they know how a spaceship should sort of look from all the sort of films and media they've seen leading up to this point.
Yeah. And maybe to an extent, the kind of the iconography of space has maybe moved on a little bit from the rockets and the blast off element, because I don't know, maybe kids are a little bit less excited about the idea of sitting strapped into a cockpit and surrounded by switches and dials. And what you want is to float through space and meet aliens and all of that stuff. The more like far out concepts. So I don't know if the iconography of, we talked about how the rockets from the war kind of then developed into the space travel rockets, and that was a real focus of what the films were looking at. And now we've got a whole new way of going into space, which is a junkyard pod that we've kind of just strapped together, and we're going to wrap it in a magic techno bubble and float into the sky.
And it's even little things, like little nuances, like when they crash after doing the first sort of test flight, they sort of like crash down to the ground a little bit. The way they come out of the spaceship is like, you saw it in Apollo 13. They're sort of like pushing the doors open, and they're sort of like gasping for air, and they're doing all of that, and it's such an established thing now. You know exactly how they're going to get out of that craft. They're not just going to, they like push the suitcase away, and they're like breaking through, and all this kind of stuff. It's just what would happen, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they do. There are those kind of reference points that they still stick with, and they also when they're getting ready to go on that test flight. So before it crashes, they do a kind of pre-launch status checks The same as what we saw in Apollo 13 and that we talked about that I mentioned in the public service broadcasting record. I can't remember what they do, but it's a much lighter version of that. They're just like, oh, everything working. We got the air, got the pipes, take a big breath, snacks, and they're all like, yeah, check, yeah. And then it's like, they're ready to go.
Systems check. Air pressure.
Check.
12-volt system.
Check.
Exterior illumination.
Check.
Harness strength. Oh, come on, check. Let's go.
The first thing they do is go to a drive-in, don't they?
Yeah, I really like that.
And then they've got, so this is the first time you see Robert Picardo as well.
Yeah.
Who is our favourite from Voyager, who plays the Doctor.
Yeah, and he's great. He's playing a character called Star Killer.
Yeah.
Which, would it be condescending to say to listeners of this show what Star Killer means? So that's Luke Skywalker's original name, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was
I
Luke
don't think it's
Starkiller.
condescending because I didn't know that until sort of like recently.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought that was a nice little touch, the fact they called him Star Killer. And apparently it's like a bootlegged version of Star Wars that was going around in Spain.
Oh, really?
Apparently that's the
Is that why the
influence for it.
Because
Oh, not Spain, Italy, sorry.
Italy,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot of like bootleg stuff in Italy at this
Yeah.
time.
Like
Is that why the
spaghetti
voices don't line up? Because in the lines are not what Robert Picardo is.
because it's intentionally made to look like it's
Right,
been
right.
dubbed over.
There's a very weird moment in me concession drive-in, and Robert Picardo kind of reacts to it in the film. Do you
Yeah.
clock that?
Yeah, I don't know if that was just clever cutting.
Yeah,
but
I think it
does
was,
look
but it's
like,
very weird.
Yeah, but then also it gets a bit more weird when you find out Robert Picardo is the alien as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
But yeah, we should probably get to that bit as well.
Right.
So the best half of the film.
So they go off in space. They that test flight goes okay, and then they prep for another one, don't they?
Yeah.
How did they get into space? They just go like straight up, right? It's just do they get a new message from the
Yeah,
aliens,
so
something like that?
they're going up, and then this is like on the test flight, they get taken up, and they're like, no, this is wrong. And then they have to sort of like rewire the computer to make it think like they're going the right direction, but they're not. So then
Yeah.
they drop down to the ground.
Do they not land after that? Or
Yes,
do they go straight back into
They land after that, and then they go back in
Right.
after there's been all these news reports about a UFO.
Yeah, that's it.
And
yeah.
so their spacecraft gets mistaken for a UFO, and there's all this sort of hilarity about that. But yeah, so they actually are being called up by something. They don't know what, and they sort of figure out that, okay, so this spacecraft that we've made from this weird dream, it's actually somebody else has given us all these details.
Yeah.
Because they want to meet us.
Because they have a shared dream, don't they?
Yeah.
And there's some new schematic, some new special piece that's going to go over the top of the rest of it. Because they've got a problem with they haven't got enough air, or they haven't got enough power, or both.
I think, it's power or air or something like that.
And
Because
there's
the power as well, they say it's like 12 volts to power it at one point.
yeah,
And
again, it's just
a
like
small battery.
It's just like kid logic.
Yeah.
It's just like we can power it with a battery out of the remote.
Yeah.
Don't
Now
worry
we
about
use a
it, yeah.
car battery, we've got
Yeah.
more power.
But they get this new message, and that's what allows them to go fully into space, and they go far too far, far too fast, and they get picked up by a spaceship.
Yeah.
And the film just goes completely off the rails.
bonkers, doesn't
Yeah, they get chased by a big metal spider robot that's
Yeah.
kind of like feeling them up.
It's got weird suction bits.
Yeah.
And it literally does like a pat down on Ben, doesn't it?
And then and grabs his ass.
Yeah. And then finds a photo of the girl in class who, why has he got a photo of that girl in class who he doesn't really talk to?
Yeah, sure, like a headshot.
Yeah. Very strange. Oh, and just before that, there's like so there's a moment where Darren says something really dodgy. He says, I hope it's a race of like Amazonian women and they want to sort of breed with us or something.
Yeah,
And it's just like, they really are just like pervy teenage boys.
yeah.
How about a planet full of Amazon women who want to breed a new race?
Pervert. Oh, come on, you guys. You'll see. It'll be great. It'll be the greatest thing ever.
And then one of the other things they do before that is they go, what should we do with the spaceship? Oh, we'll go and perv on the women's gym.
Yeah, and they do use it to, well, kind of perv. Ben uses it to go and look through that girl's window
Yeah.
while she's eating in her bedroom or something.
And again, it's kind of just like that 80s thing, isn't it? Obviously, films of that time had that kind of slant to them.
I don't think
you can forgive it for this one because it's teenage kids and teenage boys.
Yeah.
Are sort of horny and they do talk about this shit.
Yeah. I think it. Yeah, definitely. I wasn't creeped out by it because it's like, it's a teenage boy and the object of his affection is a teenage girl. It's all age appropriate.
Yeah.
It's fine. There's, but then it does get a bit creepier later because doesn't the alien make a comment about the girl?
Yeah. So let's stick with the alien stuff then. So you've got the weird robot spider. So we've met that guy, and then they all get split off. So the thing I did like is when they got onto the spaceship, it suddenly became like a theme park ride.
Okay.
So the fact they're in a waltzer, and then they sort of get around all these different bits, and it's like a fun house. They all go down a weird slide, and the waltzer sort of like is sort of like juttering as it goes forwards, and then it's all this kind of stuff which kind of adds to that childlike element of it being like a sort of like theme park thing.
Okay, yeah, I get that, and I think that would have worked if what happens at the end of those rides was any good.
Yeah,
and it's not at all. But yeah, you're right. There's some quite good visuals where they're all getting split up. So something happens to Darren. Right. So the problem I have with the second half of this movie is that just like nothing makes sense in the plot. Right. Darren goes into like a chamber where he gets like zapped in the head by some electrical beams that give him visions of the future, which just like doesn't mean anything.
That's pretty mad. That
doesn't go anywhere.
I'd actually forgotten about that entirely. I kind of
because it doesn't
from my memory
because it's never mentioned again.
It's just a random thing that happens, isn't it?
Wolfgang is flirting with an alien, which I thought that was quite funny.
It was really weird. But these aliens as well, the way they look,
horrible,
strange.
Just awful.
Yeah, they look like weird snail slug things, and one's really green, one's really pink.
Yeah,
to clearly differentiate gender. And yeah, they're like.
But she's got the girl one looks like the girl gremlin from Gremlins 2.
Yeah,
just like horrible, like the lips and the kind of like mascaraed eyelashes, and so just
the cheeks look like the woman in the Radiator in Eraserhead.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, you need to check it out because they've got those big round cheeks on her. And she also reminded me of the alien in the cantina who sings the song.
In Star Wars. Yeah. They both look like, well, it's Industrial Light and Magic.
So they're going to have that. Yeah.
But they both look like really shit background Star Wars aliens.
But they've made extra cartoony as well.
Very cartoony, yeah. So Ben meets them while the other two are like doing whatever they're doing. He kind of like gathers them all together, and then there's like 20 minutes where Robert Picardo, who is now also playing the main alien, he's just dancing around like on a stage, and he seems to only be able to communicate through the medium of quotes from TV broadcasts.
Yeah, it's really strange, isn't it? Because he doesn't always speak like that, does he?
No, that premise doesn't hold water, which I actually thought is quite a good premise, that the aliens can sort of mimic noise, but they can only communicate through broadcasts. That as a premise is fantastic.
Yeah.
But in this, it's just like, the first thing he says is, "What's up, Doc?" And then it's just silly business.
Yeah.
And he's up there on that stage for like 20 minutes. It just felt like it was never going to fucking end.
Order now and get the beautiful set of stainless steel steak knives and the miracle paring knives absolutely free! Anyway, my wife gave me a new car. It's called Rolls Can Hardly. That's right, rolls down one hill, can hardly get up the next.
They sort of explain that away by saying that all of the communications that have come from Earth, this is how the aliens think we speak. We speak in these weird snippets of TV shows, like staged sort of language.
Yeah.
So like if you're in a chat show and you've got a chat show host saying da 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 da, and it's like if it's an advert, the way they talk in those kind of things is how this alien is sort of like regurgitating the information.
Yeah, but then it starts slipping into he's saying it in those cadences, but he is speaking his own words, right?
Yeah, because he's talking about he sort of slips out of the weird like advert style
Yeah.
of talking, and then he's still kind of got that slant to it, but then he's talking about why he's met them and that kind of thing, and tries to explain why they've contacted them.
Yeah. Yeah, and he explains it fairly directly, right?
Yeah,
And it's not
After he's
not
done a
using
song.
quotes. Oh god, it was hard to watch. Really hard to watch.
so all that's going on, and then Wolfgang's in the corner getting touched up by the pink alien, and he loves it as well, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very excited by that.
Yeah. And and is this the point where the alien comments about the girl that Ben fancies? He definitely says something like,
It's hubba hubba.
yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Hubba hubba, I wish I could get my suction cups on her. Yeah. Yeah. Little bits like that. Maybe not.
Now, the kind of reveal at the end of the film is that these two aliens are
Oh, but before that, they say, oh, we didn't want to meet, we had to get you up here because we know what you do to aliens down there.
Right.
And they've seen all these 50s sci-fi films.
Yeah, so that's where they use the clip from The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah. And they do like a sort of montage of different creatures getting shot and killed. And then, yeah, obviously the moment where Klaatu gets shot as soon as he comes down from space is the bit that they sort of linger on.
Yeah. And the boys are like, oh, no, we're not like that. Or, you know, we don't kill people, but we do kill some people. But, oh, it's not like that. Yeah, it was all quite good. Like there is sort of a good film wrapped up in here.
Yeah.
But the execution of this final act is just really covering all of that up.
Yeah, it feels a bit rushed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, so going on to the big reveal, they get some sort of warning message, and one of the aliens who is called Robert Picardo's alien,
Whack.
Whack.
Yeah.
Great name.
It's not said on screen. It's just in like the credits and stuff.
Yeah, they do say like Whack a few times, I think.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, it's really quick though, and it's in between all of the weird chat.
Oh, what? When the other alien's talking in an alien language?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
But they do say Whack.
Right.
So yeah, then he says that space pirates are taking over the ship.
Yeah.
And you've got to go now.
But he's not very alarmed.
No. And it's not space pirates. What does it turn out to be?
It's his dad. They are kids.
They're just kids.
Again, like as a concept, not bad.
Yeah, I liked it when they explained it by saying, oh, you've basically stolen your dad's car
Yeah.
and gone on a joyride.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, again, just as a concept, I liked it, but I think anything where those aliens are on screen is bad. But yeah, so that's it. Kind of does that make it less creepy when he's saying I want to get my suctions on her? Like it's not because it's a
it's
grown
still-
man in the suit. And
Yeah.
that's why it's creepy.
That suit as well. Apparently, obviously you can imagine it must have been really heavy.
Yeah.
Robert Picardo got like he said it was like having a microwave on top of your head and balancing it, and he got like lacerations on top of his head.
Really? God.
From doing it, and it's like he was under such strain. So it's kind of like a Gort situation again, like with The Day the Earth Stood Still. With the guy who played that.
The guy who played that got to be in The Day the Earth Stood Still, and it's like a fondly remembered piece of art. And this, Robert Picardo, can you imagine him like seeing this at the cinema and just being, oh, Jesus Christ, that hurt my head for this.
It's like, no one will know it's me, it's fine.
I'm
He also played the dad as well.
Does he?
Yeah, he plays his dad.
Oh,
So-
yeah, the
and
dad
he said
alien.
that was
yeah.
like, I think the comparison is like, that was like having a washing machine on top of your head or something.
Awful.
Yeah, so he went through a lot
So
for that
happy
alien
for
character.
him that he got to be in Voyager later.
Exactly. He did
He's
well.
Really earned his stripes. Didn't he? So this film was, you said it felt like it was a bit rushed. It was
Yeah.
massively, massively rushed.
Yeah.
They wanted to cash in on E.T. Well, that was the main thing, I think, wasn't it? They wanted to cash in on E.T., so they kind of forced Joe Dante to stop work on it, basically. Post-production, they were just like, Joe, Mr. Dante, it's done. We're releasing it in July. End of conversation.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you know that, then you can be like, okay, because Joe Dante knows what he's doing. If he'd had more time to sort of tidy the bits up, then it could have been a whole different film.
But it's almost like he was editing it chronologically. Like he'd done a really good job on the first hour, and he was just going scene by scene. And they were like, "That's it, time's up. Whatever you've got, put it in a canister. It's going to the Odeon."
They're like, "Where are the aliens? We need aliens now. We need to do this. We
Yeah.
need a spaceship. We need that." So he's like, "Yeah," and then suddenly it's like, "Okay," and it's done. And then that's the film.
How big of a director was Joe Dante when this came out? Because this is a post Gremlins, right?
Yeah.
But before some of his other big hits, right?
It was post Gremlins, post the Twilight Zone movie. And so like he got a couple of heavy hitters there. He did The Howling, Piranha.
Okay.
So but Piranha's sort of like, it's very B movie, and it's like...
Did James Cameron do Piranha too? James Cameron directed a sort of shitty B movie as his first film.
Yeah, because we talked about it when we did the Terminator episode, didn't we? I'd completely forgotten that. Piranha 2.
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's only directed a couple of films then. So he's not... I mean, I don't know if... You wouldn't really call him like a superstar now, but he's a big name.
Yeah.
But he certainly, when this film was being made, did not have anywhere near the kind of sway you need to stand up to the studio. So he couldn't, and he didn't.
Yeah. Which is a shame because, like you said, the first half of the film is really engaging, and it's got those sort of bits which obviously tap back into your sort of childhood.
Yeah.
And I can see sort of like as a kid, you'd watch all those bits with the aliens, and those would be the cool bits as well because you're
I
like,
suppose so.
who's this creature? What's going on? But you watch it in retrospect, and it does have that 80s sort of like twang to it where it just seems a little bit too much.
Yeah. So like the point of the movie was that these alien children were interested in humans, and it's just a complete mirror of Ben and the other kids. They're reaching out, that bond is kind of reaching out across space, and they choose them to send the message to because they're like, well, we want to interact with humans and you want to interact with aliens, so we're going to give you this helping hand and give you the power of space travel, bring you up here to meet us.
Yeah. So it's like a play date, isn't it, almost?
Yes. Yeah.
It's an intergalactic play date.
Yeah.
You stole your dad's car?
Well, he said we could get away with it.
But we did.
But we didn't.
We practically did. We got away with it. Oh, you're such a wimp anyway.
So in Explorers, you've got the aliens calling the kids and giving them this schematic to create this spaceship to come and meet them.
Yeah, some solid sci-fi concepts. I wish there was a film that did these sci-fi concepts in a really interesting, engaging way. Have you got anything for me?
Well, funny you say that, Matt. Let's talk about Contact.
Yeah.
This morning's detection of an unidentified radio source from deep space can neither be confirmed nor denied.
Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position?
I checked interferometry somewhere in Lyra, I think.
Vega?
Can't be. It's only 26 light years away.
I want all these people out of here. Your having sent this announcement all over the world may well constitute a breach of national security.
Well, this isn't a person-to-person call. This may be an announcement to get our attention.
So Contact from 1997, directed by Robert Zemeckis.
So what's Robert Zemeckis directed before this? He's done, I think, all three of the Back to the Future films, right?
Yeah, because he's a writer on them, isn't he?
Yeah. And that's kind of what I know him for.
He directed Forrest Gump.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's a big heavy hitter.
Yep. What else is in his back pocket?
Well, I think obviously Back to the Future is the big one that he did.
I've got a feeling he's going to be one of those guys that directed like all of the movies, and you're like, oh my God, that's him. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Fantastic film.
Forrest Gump, as he said. Contact.
Death Becomes Her.
Castaway.
So he's obviously got good creative chops, hasn't he?
Yeah. And he's a bit of a blockbuster guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's relevant for Contact because it kind of feels like a blockbuster, but
yeah, it does.
Probably doesn't deliver if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, because it's got all of those sort of blockbuster elements, and the way it sort of sounds, it sounds like it's going to be this really big adventure, and we're going to contact. But then the actual film is a bit more thematic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got lots of stuff going on, and the sort of dialogue it's creating about its themes are really interesting, and they really had me hooked when I was watching it, and they sort of made me think about a lot of stuff when sort of like viewing the film.
Yeah, it is more of a kind of thinky movie. It doesn't go for that. It looks like a blockbuster. It's got the budget. It feels like it's got the budget of a more action-oriented film.
It's got like really big actors as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But not to say that Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix weren't going to go on to become big actors.
So, yeah, Zemeckis, kind of blockbustery. Got a blockbuster budget for this, but it is more of it's a dialogue between sci-fi or science and religion, right?
Yeah.
Which is played out quite literally on screen with the characters. But the kind of premise of the film is exactly the same as Explorers, right? It's a young character who is obsessed with sort of communicating further and further. They do it in a nice kind of grounded way at the start, where Jodie Foster's character as a kid just wants she's like a ham radio enthusiast, right?
Yeah. She wants to just see how far she can get her radio frequency out to talk to people further away.
She's just managed to reach Florida from whatever state they're in.
Yeah.
And she's asking her dad if they can reach China, the moon, Jupiter, and then Mum, who's not around anymore. And that background of tragedy is only made worse for her because her dad dies shortly after that as well. So she's kind of she's a bit isolated in her personal life, or very isolated. And she's gone on this career of communicating with the stars.
Which is kind of like the ironic thing, because she wants to contact people. She wants to build these connections to people, yet she's very fearful of those kind of relationships in her life because she'd lost both of her parents at a young age. So she's got all of that stuff in her character, which I think is very important as the film develops.
Yeah. And she meets... so she's a astronomer radio technician, right?
Yeah.
She's monitoring any kind of radio signals from space with a bunch of other scientists who do the same thing, but explicitly her function within that team is to see if any of it's extraterrestrial. And she meets Matthew McConaughey. They hit it off.
All right.
Yeah.
I can't do the impression as good as you.
I don't know. I can't do it.
I can't do the impression very well.
Have you heard the bongo story?
What's the bongo story?
Didn't he get arrested? This is like public knowledge. He got arrested. Police had to break into his hotel room, and he was just sitting there naked, just high off his face, playing the bongos. But it's true. It's what happened. Arrested playing the bongos naked. So this is McConaughey. It's pre the reconnaissance.
The reconnaissance?
The Matthew McConaughey Renaissance.
Okay, yeah.
But it's pre the period in his career where he needed a renaissance. So it's kind of before he became a heartthrobby kind of guy, right?
So it's the start of his story as an actor.
But it's him as when he was... I mean, he's very good in this.
Yeah. And his character's really cool because he's kind of like the opposite to Jodie Foster's character, Dr. Arroway.
Yeah, he's a lapsed priest or retired priest.
Yeah, he was like a missionary and stuff. They talk about things like that. He's got faith. He's got religion.
Yeah, but he couldn't keep doing it because he couldn't deal with the celibacy. So straight in there, he's a sexy priest. He's not a priest.
Exactly. Very Fleabag with that.
Yeah. And they hit it off and they spend the night together, but she's immediately like, oh, well, gotta go. And he's like, oh, how do I contact you? And she's like, oh, whatever, leave your number.
That's it. Contact. You're going to hear contact a lot when we're talking about this film because it's all about connection and contacting people.
Yeah. But she's pushing away these human relationships on Earth. So she's missing this sense of human relationship from losing her parents, but she's also not able to reach out to someone and make that connection on Earth.
Yeah, so that's why she's throwing herself into her work, and she's trying to listen out to the universe and see if there's any sort of life out there. Are there any signals to suggest so? And she's in New Mexico, and that's when she hears this signal.
Yeah.
So I loved the way they depicted this whole part of the film, like the idea of the signal coming back. And this signal is in prime numbers, so it proves that it can't just be random. So there's something behind it, and then they analyze more of the signal and they find out more and more stuff.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed that as well. I like the way that it was very sciencey, but it was science that I understand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it, because they talked in sort of science terms when they've got it, and they're like, oh, have you checked this, this, and this? But you can understand what's going on. You understand that they're checking all the different things. They're checking the satellites to make sure it's not a different satellite signal from somewhere else. They're talking on all this sort of technical jargon, but as a viewer, you can understand what's going on.
Yeah. So it's a radio signal coming from Vega, a distant star, or probably not so distant star. Well, it's 26 light years away. And it's the prime number signal to get the attention of any intelligent life. And then it's like a layer of digitally encoded imagery, right? And I absolutely love this, like the reveal. They decode the kind of static and they get to the image, and the audience can immediately tell it's a swastika. It takes the characters a little bit of time to realize they're looking at a swastika.
Yeah.
And they kind of do the whole like zoom out, rotate and all that, and it's a picture of Hitler. And everyone's just like, oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? And you're just sort of like, oh, why is that the picture that they're sending back?
Yeah.
And is it like an ominous thing or something like that?
Yeah.
But
one of the characters does immediately say, like, there's nothing ominous about it. They wouldn't understand. They've got no reference point. But the White House totally wants to suppress that. They don't want to deal with that because it's very, very realistically, that would be so hard to explain to the general public. We've been contacted by aliens and they sent us a picture of Hitler. There's too much in that to process at once.
Yeah.
It's too big.
But they explain it as it's the first sort of video transmission that went out.
It's the first video transmission that would have been powerful enough to go to deep space, which I think is true because it was just before World War II.
It's the Berlin Olympics, wasn't it?
And we talked about all of the TV technology that was going on in Nazi Germany when we looked at Destination Moon or Frau im Mond. The idea of CCTV, that came from German TV geniuses, basically, who were roped in by the Nazis to do whatever the Nazis wanted. But they had the resources there, and they would have been putting them on the massive publicity stunt that was the Olympics in 1936, was it? I think. But I think that's true. I think that from a science perspective, it is true that would have been the first or one of the first broadcasts with enough power to reach deep space.
Yeah, and that would make sense given what this film's based on. It's based on a story by Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
So do you know much about Carl Sagan?
No, I kind of feel like he's the American Patrick Moore.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea that I get from sort of looking at sort of various things about him online.
I know he's like very, very popular with a certain generation of nerdy Americans, like in a similar way that people like very fondly remember Patrick Moore.
Yeah.
And he kind of shaped the cultural dialogue around astronomy and science and stuff.
Because from what I've gathered, that Sagan was basically, he was popularizing science and that kind of thing. And he was into all sort of like astronomy and astrophysics and all this kind of like really complex stuff. But he was trying to make it accessible for people.
He hosted a series called Cosmos, which I've always wanted to see. I've never watched it. Which my understanding of it is it's like a what David Attenborough does for the earthly natural world. It was this big sort of one-off event series for astronomy and the galaxy and the cosmos.
Amazing.
And it's supposed to be very, very good. And I think, not knowing a lot about him, he might have a bit of a spiritual side in a very atheist way, as in kind of the spiritualism of just being amazed by the majesty of the universe, I think, was his kind of vibe, you know? So very scientific, very interested in all of that, but also appreciating the beauty of it all.
Yeah, because that really sort of comes out in the film as well, doesn't it? Because it's all about, they keep making references to science is about seeking the truth. But in doing that, it's about having the faith to sort of find these truths.
Yeah, Palmer's kind of case for it is that they're both looking for truth. The scientists are seeking for truth. I'm also seeking for truth. They're looking out to the stars. I'm looking within into the human soul, kind of thing. And it's the way those two characters' love story kind of works. I like the way that it's not a romance film.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you'd get in a blockbuster, isn't it? That kind of romance to it, where it's kind of like both the characters are at odds with each other, but they've got this underlying love for one another.
Yeah, I quite like the way that they like sleep together in the first half hour.
Yeah.
So it takes away some of that tension. So it's not like a will they, won't they? They already have.
Yeah. So it's like it can happen again kind of thing.
And their relationship, I think, has a bit more depth because we know they've got that connection. They spent the night together. They obviously like each other. They don't see each other for 4 years, I think. And then they have more these kind of complex theological conversations with each other.
Yeah, and they've got other stuff going on other than a romantic relationship as well.
Yeah.
Because that's not the focus of the film. The focus of the film is sort of what these two people are striving towards in the sort of research and theories and things like that.
But I think it was important for the filmmakers that they would be on the same side kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're not... they
because
are
they have
at
arguments.
Odds. Yeah, they argue and they are at odds at points.
But they're always constructive arguments because the way they talk about Occam's razor.
Yeah.
So the idea that... So I'm trying to think of what it says in the film again.
Occam's razor is the idea that the most logical answer is probably the right one.
So it's the simplest one is probably going to be the right answer.
Don't overthink things trying to explain it.
Yeah. And then Matthew McConaughey's character, Palmer, says, well, if you can't prove something, how do you know it exists? And he says, well, you loved your dad, didn't you? How can you prove that? How can you prove an emotion?
A bit of a shitty thing to say, I thought.
Yeah, it was a bit sort of like loaded, but I expected her to sort of like say that again towards the end when she's in the bit with the jury, but she doesn't.
She does.
She says something similar. It's like
she talks about taking things on faith, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But the point is that I think we're never in doubt in this film that these two characters like and respect each other, and that's important for the idea that they represent these two supposedly opposite viewpoints of science and faith.
Yeah.
But there is always respect between these two representations of those two ideas.
What are you studying up there?
The usual. Well, nebulae, quasars, pulsars, stuff like that. What are you writing?
The usual. Nouns, adverbs, adjective here and there.
I work on a project called SETI.
Search for extraterrestrial intelligence? Wow. And that is out there.
And you've got lots of different groups throughout the film who are representing these different things, the science aspect and the faith aspect. But these two main characters are the embodiment of how it should be.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because I love that. So the story breaks. They can't contain it. The White House would prefer to contain it. James Woods is really good. He's like a national security advisor. He's trying to suppress things, but it's already too late. Ellie speaks to Australia like on the night because she needs information from the other side of the world to verify things. But it goes public. It's public knowledge. And then all those groups start to form, don't they? I loved all of that stuff. Did you recognise the kind of religious leader?
I recognised him, but I couldn't think of what he was from.
He's Jake Busey. So he's Gary Busey's son.
Yeah.
And he's... how recently have you seen Starship Troopers?
Oh, he's in Starship. Yeah.
He plays the neon green electric fiddle.
Fantastic.
in that scene.
Brilliant.
But he's very good in this. He's creepy as hell.
Yeah. So he's like another aspect of the sort of religious, the faith side.
Yeah, he's just one of them though. Who else do we see? There's a great scene where she's just going to work after the story's broken, but there's loads of people outside. What other kind of groups?
So there's a guy dressed as Elvis.
Yeah.
Who says Viva Las Vegas. And there's there's the choral singers, and then you've got like the more hippie ones, and then you've got these other guys which are sort of just dancing around in sort of weird space suits and things like that.
The UFO.
Yeah, the UFO hunters
crowd,
and things like that. But yeah, they've got so many different groups of people gathered together sort of by the satellites.
Yeah.
So what groups did you notice in particular?
That was the most of them. There's a load of neo-Nazis there.
Yeah, that
I guess you wouldn't even call them neo-Nazis, would you? They were Nazis.
Yeah.
Because they think Hitler's coming back or whatever. Who else was there? I think that's about it. But I love that scene. It reminded me a bit of you remember in The Leftovers where there's the camp outside the town and it's just full of like nut jobs.
Yeah, people which have that faith in something going on.
Who are willing to go on like a pilgrimage to just sit outside something they think is extraordinary. Yeah, I love that. But I do like the idea that Ellie and Palmer are like the best figureheads of two possible sides of thinking.
Yeah. So then in that respect, you've got all of these people which are part of the faith aspect because they all have different faiths in what this is. And then on the flip side, you've got the science aspect. So you've got the character of William Fichtner, who plays Kent, who's one of Ellie's colleagues. And he's sort of like really all on board with the science aspect of it. The rest of her colleagues are also on her side. And then you've got the other position, the more extreme side of that, in the form of David Drumlin. Now, Drumlin is an absolutely despicable piece of work in this film.
Okay.
I really hated him. Played by Tom Skerritt.
Yeah.
So much respect to Tom Skerritt for making me dislike him so much in this film. But he's kind of the opposite because he is constantly just taking credit for their work.
Yeah.
And he sort of manipulating how things are going.
He's like a middle management kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
He's obviously risen up in the scientific organization that Ellie works for, but is not like a working scientist like they are.
Yeah, so he's got all of the scientific knowledge, but he hasn't got the respect or the sort of the faith in some ways to search for the truth.
Yeah.
He's just sort of picking up the pieces and then taking credit for it.
Yeah. I didn't hate him as much as you did.
Oh, I really annoyed him because he dropped all their funding at the start.
Yeah.
And that annoyed me. So he does that, and then he's sort of like, you'll never find anything. And then as soon as they do, he's the first person there.
Yeah.
And he's like, right,
Yeah.
I'm going to take credit. And he's the one who does the announcement at the White House, and it just escalates. And
He steals
just,
her thunder,
Yeah, he just keeps taking credit. And it's kind of this, it almost becomes a gender dynamic as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've got the whole fact that Ellie obviously is a woman, and this guy thinks he's Daddy Big Bollocks, and he's going to come in and like, I'm the man, I must be the one in charge, I'm a bit older, you may know all the scientific knowledge, you may have found this, you may have been the one who's been looking for this for years, but obviously I'm the one who's going to take all the credit.
Yeah, he talks over her a lot.
Just like the bad side of science.
Yeah, definitely as much. Well, he's the business side of science.
Yeah.
As much as anyone, him and James Woods are like the bad guys. I guess what I liked about them was I thought they were relatively sympathetic because it's not a film where there are real bad guys. It's quite realistically how things would play out, I think, in the situation presented. He's not a very good guy. He's very opportunistic, and he completely steamrolls Ellie and just takes over. But when he's kind of in the process of becoming the astronaut he's going to go, I guess the reason I was sympathetic is that Ellie's very Ellie gets over it and is like, agrees to work with him. And obviously he dies in a sabotage.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably why I felt sympathetic towards him, because it was sad.
I can see that, but even the moment when he's talking to Ellie and he's sort of saying like, oh, well, it's just because this is just the way the world is. And his view of the world is really negative. He says, because he pretends that he's got faith and pretends he's like doing this for God and things like that.
Yeah.
But really he doesn't believe that. And he is the person representing the human race. And this is a guy who believes in fucking people over. That's basically what he's saying in that.
He believes that it's kind of inevitable that people will get fucked over.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that that's a good characteristic to go along with that because you think it's inevitable. He's kind of just this sort of unpleasantly neutral product of his environment. That's kind of how I saw him.
Yeah. Less passion with that response.
Yeah. I didn't hate him. And I just thought that it was a good example of it being a good performance, quite a layered film. Even James Woods' character Kits, who is the kind of driving force behind not believing Ellie and trying to shut everything down.
And he's the military aspect of it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's kind of the national security guy. Even he is not completely a villain. Like, it is his job to, he's the product of his environment. He belongs to an organization that is quite suppressive, secretive, and wants to kind of control everything. That's the nature of the kind of intelligence side of the American military industrial complex.
Yeah.
But even within that, he's kind of, I don't know, his goals are fairly pure. He's got a vision of what is right for national security. He's just following orders,
Just
I guess, is what I'm saying, which
way,
sounds awful. There's these characters who...
He does have that manipulative aspect to him as well.
Yeah.
Which I think is why those characters come off not very well to the audience.
I guess what I liked is that neither of them are out and out evil characters, because this isn't a film about good and evil, and it's not black and white like that. And I think that's what makes it a more realistic film.
And I think it's to do with the fact that this is like an adult version of what we saw in Explorers.
Yeah.
So in Explorers, they get the message and they're like, of course we're going to go to space. We're going to do this. In this film, it's interesting that so they get the message, they figure out their schematics underneath all of the sort of video footage they've been sent. And it turns out that they're 3D schematics, and they suddenly have this instruction on how to make something. They're not sure what it is.
Yeah.
And they're trying to decide whether to even make it. And they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't. It could be a Trojan horse. It could be the aliens trying to attack. Could be this, could be that. And they don't have that sort of like need, that sort of want for adventure that these kids had. But that's something that Ellie has in her character, and sort of like what she's striving for in that search for truth.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that they sort of shut that down and almost don't even make it.
Yeah, they don't have the freedom to just try something.
Yeah.
Whereas Ellie has been shut down 3 or 4 times by this point in the film, and she's always just moved on and self-funded, or she seeks out private funding, and she's a character who is a bit more free to do whatever she wants and just follow her dreams a little bit.
Yeah.
So it costs $350 billion, I think, is the price tag on the machine. Which
and they made 2.
Yeah, that was one of my favourite lines of the movie. So John Hurt is Ellie's private financier, who's very eccentric, lives on a plane, and then lives in a space shuttle.
He lives in the Russian space station, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, it's space station. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called?
Mir.
Yeah. So he lives in Mir.
He's got the best line in the film, because the machine, we mentioned it before, Tom Skerritt dies. Tom Skerritt is selected through sort of backhanded,
saying what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And he's killed in an explosion, which is by one of the religious fanatics.
By Jake Busey.
Yeah, who you keep seeing throughout the film as this sort of like ominous figure. So he's in the background the whole time. And then it's that other sort of idea of faith, the extreme side, where so they're depicting all different ways you can view these different perspectives.
Yeah. So he sabotages it. I knew something was going to happen. As soon as Tom Skerritt gets chosen to be the astronaut, I knew that he was going to die.
Yeah.
It was kind of just a matter of time. But I was not expecting the sabotage and the explosion. It's a really incredible scene. That's where you get your blockbuster action movie budget moment, where the first machine, they just call it the machine, don't they?
Yeah.
The first machine is completely destroyed and wiped out.
And it's,
again, they're doing it's very Apollo 13-y with the mission control, isn't it?
I was going to say that's exactly like a space launch would be. You've got the crowds there, you've got flight control.
And they do their mission control countdown stuff, similar to Apollo 13, similar to, Explorers.
David, he's got something in his hand.
Hey! Take him! Security breach!
Bomb. He's got a bomb.
He's got a bomb!
I want that emergency response team up on the gantry now. Security, stage 1 alert. Firecom, move all fire rescue personnel to position 1.
But it all goes wrong. And then, John Hurt gets the best line in the movie where he phones up Ellie and says, did he phone her up or call her up to the thing?
She goes into a hotel room and then there's a video set up.
Oh, yeah.
And then she gets put through to an astronaut.
Yeah.
She's like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah. And it's John Hurt on the other end. And he says, the first rule of government spending is why build one when you can build two for twice the price. So they built another one in secret and it's in the middle of nowhere and it looks amazing. It looks like Mordor or something with the waves and the cliffs. And obviously Ellie's the astronaut chosen to pilot it this time around. So,
hooray!
Yeah, hooray. It's all gone well. I'm going to do my usual thing and complain about the runtime of the movie. We could have just skipped the bit where Tom Skerritt is chosen. Whatever, it's fine.
It's all part of the drama.
Because I actually really, really enjoyed all of it, so it's fine.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, this is the longest film I've ever enjoyed.
So they begin the space launch, and the way they depict all of that space stuff is really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's got a bit of a similarity to Explorers in that it's like an envisaging of a new type of space travel, isn't it? And again, it's not focusing on the rocket ship blasting off, even though it's surrounded in the NASA tropes of mission control and all of that. That the actual structure itself is not like anything we've seen before.
No. So you know that structure as well?
Yeah.
So I was reading that apparently that is the time machine which was designed for Terminator 2.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's the basic design of it, and it works perfectly for that.
Yeah, it looks a bit like... so I think they did eventually use that design in Genesis.
Yeah, they definitely used it in one of the sequels, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of like, it makes sense with the sort of orbs that they appear in.
Yeah.
In Terminator. But yeah, so it's lots of different rings, isn't it?
Yeah, it's cool. It's like 3 giant spinning rings, and they're going to drop the astronaut's capsule into the middle, and no one's got any idea what actually happens.
Yeah, no one knows.
Yeah, they followed this schematic, but it's all alien technology, and they don't actually know how it works.
Yeah, so they add stuff as well, don't they? Which is the interesting part.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, okay, so if you're making a spacecraft, you have to have a seat.
Well, no, don't they? I don't think that's the original idea, is it? It's because after the tragedy, they are then so much more safety conscious. Everything's been done in secret, but they're also insisting we want some safety measures inside the capsule. So we're insisting on a seat we can strap you into.
Yeah. And again, that is sort of the traditional way, isn't it? That's what you imagine when you go into space, the sort of pressure of the G-force, all of that kind of stuff. So they've got a seat in there, and her spacesuit apparently is modelled on like Joan of Arc's armor and things like that.
It's very... it's a unique style of spacesuit, isn't it? It looks cool.
It's like a flight suit, but then it's got like a sort of chest plate.
Yeah.
Sort of like screws into the bottom of the
I like
chair.
that, yeah. It kind of, it's like a magnetic seal, isn't it? She's literally like plugged into the seat. And she looks great. It's a really, I like that it's kind of a new style of suit. It's appropriate for it. It gives a bit of, it gives like an added layer of like iconography to Ellie's character. Like she's this new type of astronaut, unique to this film, this story.
The other thing they give her as well, so they give her a few bits and pieces. They give her a camera on like a headset. So it literally just looks like a headset, which you'd have like the people in flight control would have.
Yeah.
So they've got that. And she's also given a pill.
Oh, yeah.
A suicide pill.
Yeah, like a cyanide. I guess,
yeah. And they sort of say, this is what we've been giving astronauts for years.
Yeah. NASA denied that.
Yeah. So I thought that was like an interesting thing as well. Sort of the idea that they've got that just in case something goes terribly wrong and they have to.
Did you read NASA's denial of it?
No.
So they like very strongly like, we don't do that. We've never done that. And Carl Sagan was like, yeah, you do. I know you do. I don't really know how he knew that, but they were like, they insisted they didn't, but their response was like along the lines of, we don't do that. If an astronaut wanted to kill themselves, all they'd have to do is restrict their own oxygen supply. It's like, whoa, okay, so you've thought about it.
It's like, there you go, this is what you do.
I mean, I believe you about the pills now, but you know exactly how an astronaut would kill themselves.
But I mean, they'd have to know all this stuff, wouldn't they? Because the psychological impact of going into space must be a lot to deal with.
Well, we've seen now a couple of films that deal with the idea of getting blown away from your ship and being stranded in your suit and being alive, and that's where access to a cyanide pill, you would give it some serious thought, right?
Yeah.
Europa Report, Sharlto Copley's character goes flying off and he's having a conversation. Like, that's such a horrible moment. And that's where you would want to maybe have control over the situation a little bit.
And the moment when Jodie Foster actually goes in, like, gets dropped into this weird vortex that's being created, she keeps going, I'm okay to go, continuously.
Yeah, so that becomes really powerful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm okay to go. I'm okay to go. I'm okay to go.
Because it's like her saying, like, I'm willing to sort of sacrifice myself in the name of science. We don't know what's going to happen. I really want to continue with this experiment, no matter the cost.
Yeah, but it becomes like a mantra.
Yeah.
Because everything must feel like it's going wrong. Everything's shaking and everything feels incredibly dangerous. And in mission control, they're very worried about the readings they're getting. There's too much radiation, I think. And they're very close to shutting it down. But they can just about hear her through the static.
And it's Kent who hears it. Yeah, because Kent, who is blind, who has better hearing than everybody else, can hear all these little nuances.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's enough to give them the spur to continue with it.
So I loved all of that space stuff leading. And I mean, this is what the film is leading up to for the entire runtime.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting all of this, I have to say. So before we started planning for this series, I was not aware that this was a space travel movie. I thought that it was entirely set on Earth and it was about scientists getting messages. And I thought that was all of it. And I thought that sounds like a very boring premise for a film. And that's why I'd never seen it before. My dad loves this one. He's recommended it to me before.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise where it built up to.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the joy of it, because you don't necessarily know where it's going to lead.
Yeah.
Where will these messages lead? Will we get to that point?
Yeah.
So what transpires? She goes into the vortex.
Yeah.
And then suddenly she's in a wormhole.
Yeah, I was very surprised. Yeah. Because there's a lot of all the emotional build-up between her and Matthew McConaughey is that she's going to be gone for 50 years.
Yeah.
Which will just be like 4 years to her. And that's what I was expecting, which is conventional approaching the speed of light space travel, right? So that was the kind of space travel I was expecting to happen. And they don't. She just pops into a wormhole.
Yeah, she just popped into a wormhole, and then it's like a whole connected system. So she sees, so the ship itself becomes, it's like an orb, and it becomes translucent at moments.
Yeah.
So she can see out, and she can see the sort of like different solar systems and things like that, and different life. She sees a planet with life on it. There's like lights. And she keeps going on this crazy, again, it's like a theme park ride. And I think this is why you get lots of theme park rides emulating sort of like space travel and space voyages, like there's ones in Disneyland and all that kind of stuff. Because it is an exciting ride. And that's what's happening in this.
Again, I'd have to say this was the bit of the film that I was least impressed by. It was very, felt very messy. But then something really good happens that kind of makes it worthwhile. I felt like it lasted too long, where she's like shaking and vibrating, and there's some awkward special effects where she's like splitting in half kind of thing. And her
consciousness has to get out of the chair because the chair is useless. Why have you got the chair?
Yeah, that's what I thought was really good. She's recording and narrating for the video, and she's saying how bad the vibration is getting, and she's saying it's getting worse, it's stronger here, I can barely handle it. And then she realizes that the compass that's a little gift from Matthew McConaughey is floating free. And she's like, oh, hold on a second. And then she gets out of the chair, and the chair just like snaps off its hinges.
Yeah.
And she's safe to just happily float around.
Yeah, and that's what it was designed to be. It's supposed to be like no gravity, so she can just float around and look at whatever.
And she was perfectly safe, and they should have just followed the schematic.
Yeah. But they had to add it on.
Yeah, it was
just
good
in case. But yeah, so then she finally gets to this weird place.
Well, before she gets there, there's a really famous line that I also thought was very bad, where she says, "No words. They should have sent a poet."
Oh, yeah. That is so cheesy, isn't it?
Really cheesy. And I've heard that line like so many times. I had no idea it came from this film. I thought it like predated this film by, decades.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really old line. So it was just kind of out of nowhere, very clunky.
Yeah. You can see why it's probably a line from the book as well, I'd imagine. So maybe that's what it's
better in text.
Yeah.
So describe this place she gets to. Eventually.
So she gets to this weird beach randomly, and then it's like you can see the stars, you can see all of that, and she's pressing around and it's making weird noises.
It's a little bit 2001, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's quite surreal the way
she
gets
because the
there.
whole sort of like moment that she's getting there is with the wormholes and the interconnected systems and stuff. It is a 2001 sort of space scene.
And she drifts down to the beach in a bit of a what's the word for when you're on your side? In
Fetal position.
Yeah, in a bit of a fetal position.
Yeah.
Like the Space Baby, at the end of 2001.
I didn't notice that, but that's exactly what she does.
Kind of reminded me of that.
It's almost like she's in a holographic room or something.
Yeah.
And then this weird, faint sort of shimmer is in the distance, and it walks towards her on the beach that she's in, and it's her dad.
Yeah, I was expecting an alien.
Yeah.
I was expecting like a proper weird-looking sci-fi alien.
Exactly.
The way it shimmers into existence.
This whole bit reminded me of AI as well, when they put the aliens in that.
Yeah.
So you've got this weird shape that becomes something, and it's all like a weird hologram of what you'd expect the world to be like. And she's talking to him, and it sounds like her dad.
Yeah. It's quite a weird conversation they have, because he does say some... Basically, she gets closure on her dad's death.
Mm.
And it's like she is getting the thing that she fantasized about as a child, which was communicating with people who've passed away.
Yep.
In space.
And it's like... So when her dad passes away, there's a flashback scene, and one of the first things she does is she gets on the radio and tries to contact her dad. And then this is the moment years later when she's actually sort of contacting him in a way.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not her dad from the looks of it.
No, and that's why there's something a little bit strange about the conversation, because the alien talks to her quite openly and honestly, and just sort of explains, you got the message. We didn't contact you. You contacted us. We just replied. We didn't build the wormholes. They've existed for we don't know how long. There's lots of alien species here. Some come and stay. Some don't. That's about it. That's what it's like up here. Now you know what we know. But then he does, he quotes her dad to her.
Yeah.
He hugs her. He kisses her on the forehead. It's all very like... They've downloaded her brain, she guesses. So he's got access to what she might want from a conversation with her dad.
Mm.
And he goes along with it. He kind of gives her what she wants, which is a bit strange, right?
It's the way he describes humanity, though. That's sort of like what keys you into that a bit, because he says your species is always so lonely. And the loneliness is a theme that's going on throughout the film. Like there's a bit earlier when Palmer's talking about technology and how the more technology you get, the more alone you feel. And at this point, they've had the ultimate technology. They've got there, yet they still feel lonely because they haven't got she hasn't got those connections in her own life. And basically, what this sort of alien figure is trying to tell her is, it's all about connecting to people and sort of getting those connections and living through that. And that's the important thing that he's trying to tell her.
Yeah.
Which is also what the film's trying to tell as well.
Yeah. So what's the message that they're going for there? I couldn't decide if it reminded me of Ad Astra or if it was completely the opposite of Ad Astra. So the central kind of, for anyone who hasn't seen that without spoiling it, it is a spoiler, so spoiler warning for Ad Astra. The kind of central premise there is that maybe there's nothing out there, and if there's nothing out there, that's okay, and we've got to deal with that, and that's fine, and we've got to accept what we've got here on Earth. Contact kind of feels like the opposite and the same.
Yeah.
Like they are reaching out there to make that connection, and there is something there to make a connection with, but the message they get is, you had a heart all along, Tin Man. You know,
Yeah.
like, go back home, make connections with your people. You've made a big step in space, good for you, but there's work to be done on Earth.
Yeah, they said it's a small step in the grand scheme of things.
No words. No words to describe. Punish me. I should have said the poem.
So beautiful.
So she goes through all of this stuff and she meets this sort of like extraterrestrial. She's made contact. She's got all of this stuff. She's apparently got it all on video. And then she gets back and then no time has passed. And to everybody else, she's just dropped straight to the ocean through this big vortex.
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes about faith again, doesn't it?
Yeah, because nobody believes. Well, they got no reason to believe. She was gone for the exact length of time it takes for the capsule to drop from the top of the machine to the bottom.
Yeah. And then finally she's finding herself in this position where she's got to try and prove it, but given all her scientific skepticism, how can she do that? And what does it mean in this case? Because she spent the whole film going like, I don't believe anything unless I can prove it. And then finally she's in a position where she can't prove what she's seen. She knows she's seen this, and it's about how she can tell everybody else about it and if they'll believe her.
Yeah. And she has to concede that scientifically it's not believable. As per Occam's razor, the most logical explanation is she didn't go anywhere. It was some sort of delusion or hallucination. It was a hoax put on by John Hurt. All of this. But then, yeah, she comes down to, well, I know what I saw and I have to have faith in that, and I've got faith that other people will believe me and also experience the things that I experienced, and I can share that sense of that understanding of connection that I got from the aliens, and I can bring that down here to you.
And it refers back to what Palmer was saying previously as well, about how 95% of the population believe in some sort of higher power.
Yeah.
And in not believing in something like that, are you assuming that everybody's under some sort of mass delusion? And this idea of faith being a mass delusion is quite interesting in this film as well, because by the end of it, she's the one who's having to have the faith in what she's seen, and she's asking other people to believe her. And there's all this, it's sort of like, it feels a bit negative towards the end, but then suddenly she comes out of the jury meeting where she's sort of pleading a case about what she's seen. And then there's so many people which are supportive of what she's seen.
Yeah.
And they want to believe her. It's like X-Files, I want to believe.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of belief in what could be out there. Have they seen it? Have they done it? And sort of what does that mean in science terms as well?
Yeah. She's essentially had a religious experience.
Yeah.
She's had this whole vision, met this all-powerful being that lives in the sky, and had a profound conversation with it. And now she's come back and she's trying to spread that message. It is it's a religious epiphany, right? Because of that, I was a little bit disappointed that there's a conversation right at the end of the film between Angela Bassett, I think, and James Woods, where she challenges him, saying that her camera was on the whole time, but it only captured static, but it captured 18 hours of static, which is the length of time she claims she was in space for, which sort of basically verifies the fact that what Ellie experienced was a wormhole that took her to space, and she met an alien and she had a conversation with it. I think everything building up to that, with the conversation between science and religion, and for her to go through an indescribable or an unbelievable experience that she has to take on faith, she kind of becomes like the synthesis of the two ideologies in one person. So it's actually a little bit disappointing for it to be verified, pretty much unequivocally. She really did go to space for 18 hours. I think I would have preferred it to be, you don't actually know.
Open-ended, yeah.
It's reasonable that it's possible. We saw it happen as the audience, but possibly she was hallucinating and we, the audience, saw the hallucination.
Yeah, and then that would sort of leave it with the audience to decide who they side with. Do they side with the skeptics, or do they side with the sort of faith aspects of it?
Yeah, or for them to have their own conversation with themselves about science and faith coming together as one thing and coexisting, and the importance of those two things being able to coexist peacefully and happily as a couple, Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, or as one person, Jodie Foster, who's got to believe in faith and science at the same time.
I can't prove it. I can't even explain it. But everything that I know as a human being, everything that I am tells me that it was real. I was given something wonderful, something that changed me forever. A vision of the universe that tells us undeniably how tiny and insignificant and how rare and precious we all are. A vision that tells us that we belong to something that is greater than ourselves, that we are not, that none of us are alone.
She's like passing those sort of ideas on to the next generation. She's doing tours around the satellite dishes, and she's saying like, well, it's up to you what you believe in to these kids.
I like that. Like, I assume she's not allowed to talk about it. Like, she's been ordered by the government not to talk. Because the little kid's like, do you think there's any aliens out there? And she's like, well, maybe. Like,
who knows?
She's not like, yeah, no, there are. I met one of them and he told me.
He looked just like my dad. Freaked the little kid out.
Yeah. Well, you know, she wants to get the message out, right?
Yeah.
But she can't, I assume.
But then is it verging into cult if she starts preaching this message?
Yeah.
But then you get on dodgy ground with religion and stuff like that.
Yeah. And if she became a preacher, she would not be, that would be too, what's the word, didactic. She wouldn't be encouraging people to come to a realization on their own terms, which I think is what the film's about.
Yeah.
She would be preaching, which is a different thing.
This film's got a lot of heart to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's got all of the science fiction elements, which we know and love, but it's also got a lot of emotion and character development, hence why I really enjoyed it as well. Because you know me and character development and emotion and stuff, that's the sort of like core stuff I love. And it's got all of that in there. So yeah, Robert Zemeckis did a really good job with that story.
And there's some incredible moments of just very flashy cinematography in this as well. Loved it. Really loved it. Okay, that's all we've got time for on this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do leave us a review on iTunes or wherever else you're able to type nice words into the internet. You can reach us. You can speak to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can send us an email. James, if I was sitting at my laptop right now with my email open, I'm composing a new email message. There's a bar at the top. It says to, and it's just blank. And I don't know what to write. What should I write in there?
You type in, Matt, Journey Through Sci-Fi @gmail.com.
And that'll go straight to us?
Straight to us.
Okay, I'll test that tonight. And then if it works, we'll assume that it does work, and then you can email us and we'll read them.
Definitely. Do it. If not, you can go @Through Sci-Fi Pod on Twitter, and you can also get through to us.
Lovely. Same on Instagram?
Same on Instagram. We're all over the place. You will be able to contact us in many different ways. Not via a radio signal, though, as I don't think I know the prime number's up to 101 as per the film we've been talking about.
Well, you weren't listening when they were contacting.
I know. Terrible. Right. There won't be any hidden messages in that either. Anyway, so next episode, we will be talking about the horror of space.
Ooh.
Yes. So we will be looking at Event Horizon from 1997. And what's the other film we're going to have a look at as well, Matt? Pandorum. It's Pandorum, Matt. We're looking at Pandorum from 2009.
I just shrugged my shoulders.
He doesn't know on this occasion. And we've also got a special guest. Now, I know you know who the guest is.
Yeah, it's... I was trying to think of something funny and I haven't got... Yes, it's our good friend from the Evolution of Horror podcast, Mike Spooky Munster.
Yes, Mike Spooky Munster. The master of horror podcasting will be on the show. So yeah, we'll be chatting all things space and horror next episode. So join us then.